That blasted Hood! George stormed his way through his stronghold, sending sharp glances at anyone who so much as looked his way. After his embarrassing encounter with Robin Hood, he didn't want to be bothered. He could still remember the annoying vagrant's mocking grin as he slipped right between his fingers. He'd been so close to catching the most elusive criminal in Nottingham, and for what? The scoundrel had escaped again! Throwing open the doors to his private chambers, the sheriff dismissed the servants with a curt nod, and threw his cloak on the back of his chair. That fool, Guy of Gisborne, hadn't been much help either. He had just stood there and let the blasted outlaw escape. Why did he have to work with such idiots? Collapsing onto the chair, the man felt considerably older. Every time he let that outlaw escape, it was another black mark on his record with Prince John. Every black mark on his record meant that he might lose his position as Sheriff of Nottingham. And every time that he thought he might lose his position, he had to burn something. There was something he could burn. Grabbing a seemingly useless piece of documentation from his desk, he flung it into the homely fire in the hearth next to him. Watching the parchment burn, he chuckled under his breath. There, he was calm now. The parchment was shrivelling in the fire, and all was good. For now. "Sire," a voice sounded behind him. Rising up in a fury and spinning around quickly, George felt spittle form around his mouth as he roared, "Get out! Get out, you fool!" Grabbing the nearest thing to him, his cloak, he attempted to throw it at the servant, but in his fury, the garment only managed to make it a few feet away from him. However, his words had more effect as the poor, unsuspecting man, as he bowed lowly and, spinning on his heels, ran out of the room. George felt his fury rising once again, and bent down low to pick up his cloak, an expensive garment. Storming back to the fire, he dropped the still wet piece into the fire, watching it steam. Having calmed down once again, George walked over to the closed window. He could hear the pounding of the heavy rain outside that had started as the blasted outlaw had escaped. The ground had gotten quite muddy, he finally had sense to remember, and staring down at the muddy footsteps on the floor, the sheriff felt his rage rising again. These days, all he felt was rage. Ever since Robin Hood had returned, he felt angry all the time. Even burning things couldn't relieve his anger for long these days. He didn't understand why the man had affected him so. And as for the lovely Marian Fitzwalter, ever since she had disappeared, he had felt slightly empty. He envied the fool, Guy, for being engaged to the beautiful woman, what with her luscious red hair, her vibrant personality, her womanly figure. The man sensed, rather than heard, another man coming into his quarters. Whirling around to face him, he realized that the man was wearing a triumphant look on his face. "What is it?" he snapped. The man smiled at George and chuckled. "Sire, good news, although Hood escapes our reach." At this, George's rage was very visible, and the man quickly went on to the good news. "But the young man who offended you the other day is in their custody, and your men are awaiting orders," he proclaimed, beaming. George gave an odd little skipping motion before responding. "Excellent! Excellent work! Now all I need is that order of execution I had prepared for that blasted Hood. I just need to change a couple of words and add that scoundrel's name to the top. Oh, this is a wonderful change of events!" he exclaimed, sidestepping to his desk and sifting through several pieces of parchment in search of that order of execution. When he could not find it, he frowned. "That's odd. I was certain it was lying right on my desk, waiting me for return tonight with Hood in custody. Of course, I don't have Hood." His voice trailed off in growing rage as he realized something. A certain event passed through his head. He was grabbing a piece of parchment from the top of the pile on his desk and throwing it into the fire. A throaty groan escaped his lips. "I burned it! I burned the execution order! Out!" He screeched the last word, throwing in an inkwell at the unfortunate man. George then swept his arms across the desk, sending items flying every which way, including a bottle of something that had been sitting at the edge of his desk. The bottle landed in the fireplace and cracked open, spilling the liquid over the flames, causing them to roar up suddenly in a miniature explosion. The man who had brought George the news bowed quickly and ran out of the room before George could say or do anything more. George almost screamed. Then managed to relax slightly. Reaching for his cloak, he remembered that he had burned that. So he simply marched out of his quarters, wandering through the halls, glaring at all whom he passed. Today was not a good day, and it had all started with one man. That blasted hood! Those round the sheriff heard him mutter.